Welcome to Chapter by Chapter. I'm your host, Brian Thomas Kropp, and I believe that stories have a tremendous power for good. And so I write them and I enjoy sharing them with you. If you are new to the podcast, you are very welcome to be here. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee or a tea or whatever you like. The way this show goes is in just a moment, you'll hear a chapter from one of my books. And then on the other side of that chapter, we'll get into some of the behind the scenes, how the chapter was made, or some other Easter egg type things that are going on in there. If you like behind the scenes material, this is a great show for you. We are in the middle of a crime noir novel that I released earlier in 2022. It's called Shell Game, and it involves Evan Gold, who is a private detective in a small town called Athens, Kansas. And just recently in the book, we find out that his partner, named Gabe Silver, who was on a case to find a runaway father for a client named Molly Brandt. In the middle of that, Gabe gets himself killed, and the police are accusing Evan, and even Gabe's widow is accusing Evan of doing some nasty business, killing some people around town. And right now, Evan is in the middle of trying to get his head on straight about how to go about solving this murder. So that's sort of where we are in the story so far. Stick around for chapter 10 of Shell Game, and then all the behind the scenes stuff after that. But before we get to chapter 10, here is a word from this week's sponsors. Chapter 10. Evan stepped out onto the street in front of his office building and looked up at the sky. The fog was so thick by that point that it had erased the top floors of the bell tower at Athens State University. Evan felt closed in by the misty ceiling and thought it fit his mood perfectly. One broken marriage with an unseeable future, one dead partner with little to go on to find his killer, and a business that remained on the edge of financial ruin. He set his hat on his head and worked his way across the street. His stomach reminded him that he'd skipped breakfast, and it was close enough to noon to justify lunch. Besides, he'd also skipped dinner the night before. All he'd had to eat over the past day, if one could call it eating, were several cups of coffee so thick and bitter it might have been closer to pudding than a beverage. He ducked into Mulready's for corned beef on rye, extra kraut, and a cup of black coffee. The place was packed with university students who had just come back to town to start a brand new year. The atmosphere was lively, and Evan overheard scraps of worried conversations about the murders. The Athens Gazette had printed a special morning edition detailing the very little information they had been able to pull together. It was not till then that Evan realized Sophie must have kept the papers away from him. If this deal with Catherine was going to play out, he was going to miss old Soph. Evan sat up on one of the stools at the counter, and the eatery's owner, Mark Mulready, stepped over to check in on Evan. Mulready was a man of spherical shape and a waddling gait. His thinning salt and pepper hair covered his scalp in greasy rivulets. Mulready offered his condolences for Gabe's loss, saying, "I couldn't believe it reading the paper this morning. Gabe was like a ray of sunshine coming here. You know what I mean?" Evan nodded. "You gonna catch the guy who did it? Gabe had a family, right?" "Seems more a job for the police, don't you think?" Evan said. "They don't take too kindly when other people step into their cases." Mulready wiped a forgotten water ring from the counter. "But he was your partner," Mulready said. "I mean, I know you guys didn't always get along, but what does that mean? I've been married 30 years to the same woman." He laughed a raspy chuckle and leaned an elbow on the counter. "We don't see eye to eye all the time neither, but someone does her harm, and you better bet no police officer's gonna keep me from doing what I gotta do to make things right. You know what I mean?" "I know what you mean," Evan said. "Don't you worry. One way or another, truth and justice have a pesky way of making themselves known." Evan had wanted to eat in the peace and solitude of his thoughts, but had a hunch others would start to nose him out and start asking unnecessary questions and giving advice and theories on who probably killed Gabe. It wouldn't be helpful. So he thought better of his plan and asked for his food to go. 11 minutes later, he got his food, thanked Mulready, tipped the waitress, and headed north to get on the streetcar headed towards Exchange. As he rode, he ate. The sandwich was good, but Evan didn't think much about it. He had his thoughts to chew on, thoughts he knew needed to swirl around for a while till they found the right place to land. It wasn't that everyone liked Gabe Silver that got under Evan's skin. It was that he didn't like having to agree with others' opinions. It caused a slow burn that ate at his peace of mind. He told himself he needed to get over it. The man was dead. Everyone has faults, and it's better to think about the highlights than dwell on the low ones. Evan hopped off the streetcar and walked up to the corner of 7th. His shoes scraped along the sidewalks of Athens till they came to the front steps of the Gloria. This was the address Molly had provided. Evan winced a little when he remembered the smell of the lobby. Gloria didn't seem the appropriate name for it. It had been constructed 50 years earlier when the optimism of a new century and its progressive ideals bankrolled all sorts of newfangled this and ultramodern that. There was plenty of money in Athens back then, bringing investors to try out new thoughts in society, education, and industry. As Evan looked again at the hotel's facade, it looked like no new dimes had been spent on the place since the investors left town. What remained was the distinct odor of forgetfulness and neglect. Evan took his last bite of sandwich and finished his coffee before tossing his paper goods in the spittoon near the front door. He strode up to the registration desk and asked if Miss Brant was in. She was not. The clerk said she checked out earlier that morning. Evan had not anticipated that and leaned his back on the desk, pondering his next move. Evan sucked his teeth, straightened his hat and coat, and was about to head out when he heard a familiar voice. "Hey, Evan!" Evan turned to see the Gloria's house detective. He was a good-hearted man about the same age as Evan, but his face showed he had not lived life nearly as hard. The detective put on the demeanor of a funeral director and said, "Shame about Gabe." "Yeah," nodded Evan. "Real shame," the detective said. "Always liked it when he came in here. Always had a smile for me." "What else can you say about a man?" asked Evan, looking at his shoes. "True," said the detective. "I saw you and wanted to catch you to give my condolences. I know it doesn't bring him back, but..." His voice trailed off, and the two men stood there in silence for a few moments. "So what brings you in today?" the detective blurted. "I would have figured you would have been out finding Gabe's killer." "Yeah," Evan sighed. "Somebody hired us yesterday. Gabe was working the case when he met his end. The client said she was staying here." "That's right," the detective said, as if he had just remembered. "I did see Hi-Yo Silver in here last night. I just didn't think anything of it till just now." "Yeah?" Evan said, instantly curious. The plan had been for Molly Brant and Jason Charles to meet up at the Broadway. Was this a change in the plan or a detour? "Did you talk to him at all?" "Nah," said the detective. He looked like he was on the job. Then the detective leaned into Evan and lowered his voice. "Speaking of which, in case this helps you out, I saw him follow a couple out of here last night. A dame. She was dressed to the nines, and she leaves with some meathead." Then another connection was made in the detective's brain. "Say, now that you mention it, the man the dame was with, didn't I see his face in the morning paper? Didn't he get shot too? The paper's saying the two murders are likely connected. What do you think?" "I don't know," Evan said. "Haven't seen the paper today." The house detective quickly pulled one from the end of the counter and slid it in front of Evan. "See?" he said, tapping the meathead's picture. "That's him." The blood in Evan's body stopped for an instant as he gazed at the portrait. The face that stared back at him from the morning papers, the one labeled as Jason Charles, was none other than the annoying, sweaty man from the flea market. Evan took a breath to regain his composure before he said, "I can neither confirm nor deny, Charlie. You know how it is," Evan said. "Only time will tell. Bad night in Athens as much as anything, probably. Whatever happens, I'll do what I can to keep the hotel out of what I give over to the police." "Yeah, thanks, Evan," the detective said. "Could you do me a favor in the meantime?" Evan asked. "If I can be a help to you, Evan, just ask," he said. "What can you tell me about the woman Gabe was following? I'm asking you, you understand, but I want you to forget in case interested parties start getting curious. You get me?" The detective gave a knowing nod. "I'll see what I can pull up. Wait right here. Won't take a moment." The detective left, and sure enough, he was quickly back with information on Molly Brant. "She arrived last Tuesday," he said, reading from a registry. Came in with only a few items, probably not staying a long time. Anything out of the ordinary? Evan asked. The detective ran his finger down the page and shook his head. Nuh-uh. No calls, no mail. Pretty unremarkable. Only received one guest, a Mr. Jason Charles. He paused, and then checked the picture in the paper and grunted. Huh. Before looking to Evan for confirmation. Evan nodded. The detective went back to his book. Here's something. Says she went up to her room last night around 11, went out this morning around 9:30, came back an hour later, and was checked out by 11. That's a busy 12 hours, Evan said. Did she happen to leave a forwarding address? Yeah, said the detective. The Walnut Grove Apartments. It's down on... I know the place, Evan interrupted. Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate the help. Anything I can do, Evan, the detective said. Real shame about Gabe. A real shame. Evan nodded and stepped back outside. He checked his watch. It was almost 1 o'clock. Evan wanted to visit Miss Brandt and learn her version of events, but since his office would be on his way, he decided to check in with Sophie first. When he arrived back at the office, Sophie Landis stood at the file drawers, making herself busy. Her head snapped over to the front door when she heard Evan enter and rested her elbow on the open drawer. You missed all the fun, she said. You should stick around more often. Is that right? Asked Evan. Lieutenant Bobby Short just left, she said. Yeah? What did he want? Evan asked. He felt his face begin to tighten. Said he was looking for guns. Said you kept a few around the place, she said. What did you do? Evan asked. Sophie smiled at Evan. I told him he could come back when you were here. He didn't have a warrant, and I don't know the combination to the gun safe as far as he knows. Good girl, Evan said. He comes back here, don't let him in. I'm fine if he wants to go fishing, but I'm not about to give him a pole and a hook. Evan started to make his way back to his office when Sophie stopped him. By the way, Miss Brandt called while you were out, she said. She wants to see you. Evan turned. Did she happen to say where she's gotten herself to? Sophie picked up a slip of paper from her desk. She said she's staying at the Walnut Grove Apartments. That matches what I got from her former residence, so that's good, Evan said. But she's not going by Brandt anymore, Sophie said. No? Asked Evan in mock interest. Nope. Her new name is Wolf, Sophie said. Evan chuckled to himself and said, I'll bet it is. So in re-listening to this chapter, I found a lot of interesting things that may be interesting for you. Just to get this one out of the way, I know that The Lone Ranger was a very famous TV show back in the 50s, and I could not resist the moment to quote that from the house detective of the Gloria saying, "Hi-yo, Silver," when referencing Gabe. That was just me being fun with, there's times you write things and it is really, you're alone. It's you and a computer or you and a notepad. And at some point you just got to make yourself smile. And so I wrote, "Hi-yo, Silver." Other things that are smallish, but just kind of fun little things. The idea of the hotel or the apartment, no, it's the hotel where Molly Brandt initially is staying, where the house detective is that Evan runs into is called the Gloria. And sadly, the Gloria does not live up to the name, like glory, the majesty, Gloria. It's kind of a rundown place. However, I did name it after my mother-in-law. She is not a rundown building at all. She is a delightful lady, but as I try to, I'm terrible at naming things, so I grabbed names that already exist. And I did think it would be fun to have a rundown place that was named the opposite of that. And she's got a fantastic name of Gloria. And so I threw her name in there, knowing that her personality is not like that building at all. But there you go. And then Mulready's. I have never been to Mulready's, but Mulready's exists. It is in my mind as I was going down Google Maps on the street view. because I haven't been back to Emporia in any significant way since I moved out to go to college. I'd be back at, and if you haven't been a part of the show before, Athens, Kansas, where the book is set, is sort of a imagined carbon copy of the town I grew up in, which is Emporia, Kansas. And, I'd go back for breaks and that kind of stuff in college. And my mom and my stepdad moved down to Texas several years ago now. So my brother lives in Dallas. There's really not a lot of reason for me to run up there. It's a 10-hour drive from where I'm at in Fort Worth. So there's just not a lot of reason to get up there, though I love it. And I've had friends who have now moved to Kansas City, and on their way through Emporia, they'll take pictures of the exits for Emporia or the Lyon County sign. And I really do enjoy those kinds of things. And but I haven't really been back. But I was looking down Commercial Avenue and trying to imagine if I were to put the gold and silver detective agency somewhere on Commercial in Emporia, where would that be? And then what's around it? And right across the street from where I imagine the detective agency is, there is currently a bar called Mulready's. And looking at the pictures of the place online, it is exactly the kind of place that if it was not a bar, but instead a diner, like a sandwich counter kind of place, where Evan would go and pick up a sandwich or two, or where university students might hang out to read the paper. And so if you're in Emporia, I can't recommend Mulready's at all because I've never been there. But it looks like a fantastic, if you're into bars and pubs and that kind of stuff, it might be a nice place to visit. The atmosphere looks as just Kansas saloon bar as you can imagine, while still being modern. So you go check out that. And then there's this thing that in Emporia is a weird place in that it is on the frontier of America. And when Kansas is becoming a state post-Civil War, I mean, it's already a state in the middle of the Civil War, but as it's kind of coming into its own, it is still on the edge of the current modern civilization. The East Coast was kind of already developed, and all of that development was moving west. And so when you get to like the 1890s, 1900s, you get all the way to California, and it's still rather primitive compared to Kansas. Kansas is kind of on the cusp of all the newfangled things because it was on the edge of progression. And Emporia is weird in that it's just a small, out-of-the-way town. And yet, like if you went back and did research, why, I don't know. But if you did research on, like, say, old Emporia postcards, it is a beautiful town. It looks like something out of Anne of Green Gables or Pollyanna or one of those kinds of places. Wide streets, tree-lined streets, beautiful giant Victorian-style homes. It is beautiful. I think time has not been as kind to Emporia as the originators of the town wanted it to be, but they started it on purpose. It was to be a town that sort of housed all these modern progressive ideals of the late 1800s, early 1900s, where it seems like societies believed we could manufacture the perfect society and we could put in the right schools and the right homes and kind of manufacture Shangri-La. But you needed to be in a place where you could develop. And so the frontier sort of seemed like the place to do that. And growing up, I think I was on the back end of a lot of that. The grade school that I grew up in, it was part of the university. Emporia State University still exists, as far as I know. It's still a good school. And at least at the time, the big school, like the thing you went for, if you were going to choose Emporia State, was to become an educator. You would either be working in grade schools, high schools, that kind of thing. And so there was a rather developed educational school, the Teachers College. It's where my dad taught. It's where my mom and he met. She was a student there. And there was a school, Butcher Elementary School. It's not part of this system anymore, but it was a part of the university. And it was a place to try out all these different educational philosophies on the children of the university's employees. So we got to go there, me and my brother, for a few years. And it's just a very interesting kind of place. So I get the impression that had I been around in the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, Emporia would still kind of have this residue of progressive ideals that, as it turns out, didn't quite pan out the way everyone thought that they would, or if they were to pan out the way everyone thought they would, nobody gave them the maintenance book so that could happen. But anyway, so that's what that was about. But then I think there's this theme that keeps popping up. I don't really think about themes when I'm writing. I'm just trying to get the plot done, or I'm trying to work on dialogue, or I'm trying to work on imagery and those kinds of things when I'm in revision. And then at some point it clicks into me what all these things have in common. And I know with Showdown in the Yukon Part 1, a theme that came out was, what do I do with, like, what is the importance of wealth? And how much of an importance does that have over my life, and how much of it is a driver for me? And in this book, it really does seem to be a theme of loyalty, and loyalty to your partner, whether that's your wife, whether that's your office mate, whether that's a detective type partnership. There's a loyalty that is owed, and what are the ramifications if you are not loyal, or if you offend my loyalty in some way? And so I think that's a theme that's coming out. Like, is Evan going to be loyal to his partner in finding the murderer? Is he going to be loyal to his wife and help keep that marriage together? Loyal to Sophie, loyal to Judith Silver, Gabe's widow, and all of those things keep coming up. And I think that's an important theme for you and me to keep in mind, that there are teams that God has placed in our life, whether that's our family or our work or just our pack of friends. And there is great power in loyalty, and there's great importance in loyalty. You don't want to be stupid with loyalty. You don't want to be loyal to a bunch of thieves. That's a bad group to be with, or say drug abusers or those kinds of things. But there is great strength and teamwork that can come together when we are loyal to the right things. And so if you are in a marriage, if you are on a team, if you are working with people, it is good to step into that loyalty and stand up for them. And good things will come from that as you team together. So I guess that's my sermon for the week. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and would encourage you to swing over to brianthomascrop.com. If you haven't signed up for my readers group, I would appreciate that. Just send me your email address and I will send you a bunch of stories, and then we can stay in contact with one another. You can also swing over to all the places, the Amazons, the iTunes, the Spotifys, wherever you're listening to this, and you can leave ratings and reviews. You can recommend books simply through those ratings and reviews, and help get those in front of more people than I can do all by myself. And if you enjoy them, let other people know. That would be great. But I hope between now and then you have an opportunity to say thank you to your teams that you are loyal to. And I hope to see you back here next time. Have a great week.